Allison Belli from One Voice of Hunterdon County, and I'm here today with Amy Hicks, who is the Recovery Advocate Coordinator at Open Door Recovery Center, based out of the Harvest Family Success Center in Flemington. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Allison. Thanks so much for having me today.
It's great to see you. I'm excited to chat with you today. I thought we would get together and if you wouldn't mind, I know you've kind of ended up at Open Door Recovery Center for now, in terms of leading the team in some ways. And I thought, if you would be willing to kind of tell us a little bit about your own personal story of recovery. And
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. I would be happy to. And just thanks for having me here. It's good to see you. Feels like talking with a friend. I feel like I should have a cup of coffee over here somewhere. I don't. I have a water bottle and an apple instead.
I know. I just got water too.
Yeah, my personal story of recovery. Sorry if it's a little convoluted because my personal story of recovery feels very convoluted. I didn't use any substances until I got to college. I was probably almost 21. I was very much like a goody two shoes growing up in high school. I was, three sport athlete, honors, high honors, planning to go to college for 4 years, went away to school. But during my time in high school, I started to struggle with some mental health diagnoses. And when I got to college, that kind of started to become more apparent. And so that atmosphere, being away from home and kind of feeling a bit more unstable, and then being in that environment where drugs and alcohol are a bit more accessible, I did do some of that normal like experimentation, and I kind of had that moment where I think I took my first drink, and there was that moment where like, oh, the anxiety kind of evaporated, becoming intoxicated. And I was like, oh, is this how everyone else who doesn't have like anxiety feels all the time? Are they this relaxed or able to just kind of be? And it felt like I was kind of chasing that feeling for a while. And soon after that, again, it felt like my mental health diagnoses came to a head. I pulled what many folks in recovery will call the looking for a geographic cure. I switched locations where I was at school, thinking that because I was really miserable, thinking that it had to do with, I must be miserable at where I'm at school. So I went to a different school. Turns out that it was just me being miserable, dealing with my mental health conditions. And I moved in the middle of winter to a place that was farther north from where I'd been at. I had no friends or support systems besides a family member who was also at school with me. And I basically just started drinking and using to cope with that. At that time, I experienced a sexual assault that I really wasn't able to identify at the time as a sexual assault. I thought it was just like, oh, that was a thing that happened. But kind of looking back at that, it was like that was when things really spiraled downward for me. And there was a period where I essentially did not go to class, just left my room to essentially go to the gym and like eat for about 2 or 3 months, probably a semester's worth. And at that point, I finally was able to ask for help. I left school to come home and go to an intensive outpatient program. At that point, still not identifying there was substance use disorder at play, when there definitely was. But again, I had been diagnosed with some mental health conditions in the past, so I thought like, okay, this is the main factor at play. Went to these these programs, received treatment, got out, was doing okay, still using substances to cope with the underlying depression, anxiety, etc. And again, that snowballed to some really unmanageable conditions. I ended up having a grand mal seizure because of the substances I was using. At that point, I returned to the same IOP, received treatment in a co-occurring program, graduated from there. I started going to a 12-step fellowship, thinking that, okay, alcohol was definitely a factor in my story, so I have to put down alcohol. And I did, but I was also prescribed medication for anxiety, and that slowly kind of crept up on me because that was still very much kind of sitting in the back of my mind. And I thought, well, I'm prescribed this, so I can kind of take as much of this as I want. And that, again, became an issue for me to the point where I used about a month's of that worth of that in a week, went into withdrawal, was suicidal, was hospitalized again, went to a different intensive outpatient program, and then got out, really kind of hit a hard reset on my life, took a little break from working, from school, went back to work after a small break, took a break from school, refocused on my sobriety. That was it was October 13th, 2017. It was a Friday, so it was Friday the 13th. I know they say that's unlucky, but for me, that was my sobriety date. And I worked for a couple years at Starbucks, just doing retail therapy for other folks, but it was very therapeutic for me in terms of learning how to interact with the world again. It really built up my confidence because I didn't know how to interact with other people, how to have like normal social interactions. That was something that scared the bejesus out of me. So that was a really important stepping stone for me in my recovery. I continued to go to a 12-step fellowship, and after a while, Starbucks kind of ran its course. I actually fell into my job working as a peer recovery specialist when I had left Starbucks for a little bit, was talking to actually my sponsor, the 12-step program, who, was talking about looking for another avenue of work. And they said, hey, I have a friend who works for this organization. I have this role that they know of. There's an opening. I think you should apply for it. And the next day I had sent my resume into prevention resources to my now boss. And I had a phone interview that afternoon, and the rest is history. I was working for the Open Door Recovery Center. I took the Recovery Coach Academy and ethics training and became a peer recovery specialist. And it's kind of one of those things that I had never envisioned for myself, at least in terms of working in this field. I always knew that I wanted to end up in some kind of line of work where I was doing something that felt meaningful to me, but I didn't actively set out to work in like recovery or a treatment. So it's one of those things that I can't really explain how it happened. It just kind of did. So I'm not in the business of looking for answers, but I'm grateful that things happened the way they did. It's one of those things where if I didn't experience all of the things that weren't so great, I wouldn't be able to be as useful as I am in my role today. So, it's, you kind of have to have both sides of the coin.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for taking us all through that, because it's really helpful. And I think that, so much of what we see in prevention is that, recovery is so essential to helping especially youth understand, a certain pathway. And to some of the things, one of the things that we sometimes ask is, is there anything that you think could have changed the trajectory at all? Or do you feel like this, I know, sometimes the answer is, this was the path, right? And so this brought me to this point. So, I mean, is there anything where you kind of go, oh, if I would have gone right instead of left, like, do you think it would have changed the trajectory at all?
Mm, It's a good question. I don't I don't necessarily I don't necessarily think so. Um I think a lot of it has to do with my own stubbornness and pride, and kind of my personal unwillingness to admit defeat until I was like beaten into the ground. I kind of had to learn, at least for me, sometimes I have to learn things the hard way. There were I think there probably were a lot of resources available to me, that I probably didn't avail myself of. And I guess I think there were probably a lot of things that contributed to my resiliency growing up. I don't know, but I don't know if, like you said, it might have just been that this was my path that I needed to go walk towards self-discovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got me thinking about how, prevention is a little bit, I'll take your word for it. And recovery is like, I have learned experience now. So it's the different, and I wonder if sometimes that's just a difference in personality, like despite, environmental factors, right? And biological factors and social factors, right? So despite all of those things, it's kind of do I take your word for it? I like how you said like you were stubborn and you like just had to kind of like go through it versus, you know, I've got to experience this myself before I can actually take your word
Yes, yeah. And I am very much a what do they call that? The hands-on learner. Which
for it.
sometimes it works out okay. Sometimes it's a little more painful, right? In this experience, it's definitely, I wouldn't say go out and necessarily explore it for yourself. But it's what I had to do to get to where I am today. And I wouldn't say I can't I mean, I'd say there are moments in time that I am not proud of, but I would say like, or things that, obviously there are things that as part of my recovery that I, made amends for, but I can't say that I regret the whole process because it brought me to where I am today. And I don't regret where I am in my life today. I don't regret being able to be of service to other folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great segue because I thought maybe we talk a little bit about being a peer recovery specialist. What would you like folks to know about that? I don't know that just everyone is familiar with, what that is and what role it serves in our recovery community. Would you like to kind of touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I mean, I like to say that we're kind of Swiss Army knives in terms of recovery. The really important distinction, I think, for the layman or for anyone who's listening or watching and being like, I have no idea what the heck you guys are talking about. So a peer recovery specialist is someone who has lived experience or is a family member with lived experience of someone who's recovering from a substance use disorder, any kind of problematic substance use, whose goal is to walk alongside someone who, is in recovery or recovery curious, towards a recovery that of their choosing. The idea, like I know I talked about that I found recovery through a 12-step program, right? But the the ideology of a peer recovery specialist is that recovery isn't one size fits all. So I can't go up to, I don't know, Jay on the street who may be struggling with a substance, and say, all right, so here's what I did, Jay. I went to a 12-step group, so now you have to go to a 12-step group too. You have to make X number of meetings and do this work. The idea is that Jay could come to me and say, these are my goals, these are my aspirations. And I would say, okay, so what are the barriers standing in your way? And how can I help you get around them or remove them? The whole idea is that it's person-centered, and it's essentially I'm riding sidecar and that the person is the one driving the car, right? And so in our work at the Open Door, we offer a variety of peer support groups for folks. We have a couple of 12-step groups that use our facility. We also offer a variety of other peer support groups. We have some smart recovery groups. Smart recovery is a self-management and recovery training group. It uses a lot of evidence-based scientific method, cognitive behavioral therapy. We offer a Buddhist-based group called Refuge Recovery. We have some groups for folks who are on recovery court. You might hear it termed drug court, but we try to shy away from some of this language that sounds punitive or can be stigmatizing. The other really important aspect to mention is that we are not clinicians. We are not counselors. We don't counsel. We don't give advice. Our real goal is to just lend a listening ear to folks. Active listening is a really important part of our job, and we can help folks navigate resources or collect resources, but really it's up to the person to decide what they want to do. I don't make any decisions for people. It has to be about the person and what they want. So it really, Allison, I think it's hard to say what it looks like because there's no real, peer support looks different depending on the person. Someone might come in and say, I've been out, running 4, 5, 10 years. So I have a big gap in my resume and I need help, writing filling that. Okay. So we can work with you on putting together a new resume or helping you put together, a nice new wardrobe for your interview or something like that. Or it might be, I'm struggling putting together my documentation for housing or getting myself together to apply for Social Security, or I need someone to sit in court with me on the needs of the individual.
Absolutely. So it's real. So what I'm hearing you say is it's really just meeting the person where they're at when
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. With whatever that is in terms of where they are on the path, on their recovery path, and what's next. So that makes perfect sense, is that's you're just meeting them where they are in whatever way. And it's incredible that you have those resources there at Open Door, right? To connect people to the things that they need next.
Yeah. And, if it's not there in-house at the Harvest Family Success Center or somewhere else under the umbrella of prevention resources, it's okay. Who can we call, to figure out who has them? That's kind of our job.
Yeah. I love it.
And we do try to have some fun in recovery too, because I know that was something I needed to rediscover how to do. Trying to have some sober fun. That was a big paradigm shift.
Yeah, so I know that Open Door offers so many different programs to kind of to host those kinds of activities. So what's one of the things that is coming up most recently that you are excited about?
I think I want to say it is July 8th. We are partnering. Well, we bought space for a table at the Flemington DIY, which is like a community art space. Once a month on a Saturday from 12 to 5, they have a makers market. where they invite community members to come and sell, goods, can sell records, shirts, or things that they have made. So we bought a table and we're inviting, anyone in recovery or their family members, friends, anyone recovery adjacent, which we, would love for that to be the whole community, because I mean, at this point, I think everyone has a friend, a family member, a loved one who is recovery adjacent at this point, to come and, just register with us and either drop off some art if you want to sell some stuff, just to celebrate the, the artistic talents and the resiliency and the creativity of the recovery community. I think that's one thing we could do to end some of the stigma that folks have around folks in recovery. That we're folks who have aspirations and talents just like anyone else.
Excellent. And so that's July 8th, correct?
Yes.
Okay, at the Flemington DIY. Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, Amy, thank you so much for taking the time to sit with me today and just share so much of yourself. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Allison. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.